fallout from failed trade negotiations mean new tariffs from China. A look at what products will be affected here in the U.S. The already big field grows a little bigger. We'll have the latest on Democratic candidates hoping to make the White House their new home. And we sit down with Senator Tom Cotton to discuss his new book and the importance of Arlington National Cemetery. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation.
Trade, tariffs, and what they mean for the American economy. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm Jenna Browder.
And I'm Amber Strong, in for John Jessup. Trade tensions with China escalating today after U.S. officials released a new list of more Chinese products targeted for possible tariffs.
Yeah, the move comes after President Trump confirmed plans to meet with China's president next month. CBN News White House correspondent Ben Kennedy has tonight's top story.
The list covers products like laptops, saw blades, turbine parts, garlic, and even tuna. It's a part of the $300 billion of Chinese goods now being targeted for yet another tariff hike.
We're having a little squabble with China because we've been treated very unfairly for many, many decades.
President Trump is confident the U.S. and China will reach a deal.
We are, again, in a very, very strong position. If they want to make a deal, it could absolutely happen.
The first move on tariffs, followed by China's retaliation on U.S. imports, will likely pinch American businesses, consumers, and farmers.
A lot of farmers are going to have to come up with alternative sources of income. I'm going to start growing a lot of hay.
China bought 60% of U.S. soy exports before the trade war. Trump promised to help out farmers, offering $15 billion in a new bailout. Trump tweeted Tuesday that our great patriot farmers will be one of the biggest beneficiaries of what is happening now. Hopefully, China will do us the honor of continuing to buy our great farm products, adding that he's looking forward to discussing this in a meeting with President Xi in June.
The relationship I have with President Xi is extraordinary. It's really very good, but he's for China and I'm for the USA.
One pro-trade group says the tariffs could cost a family of four more than $700 a year. To top that, global markets lost more than $1 trillion in value due to this trade war. Ben Kennedy, CBN News, Washington.
And Riley Walters of the Heritage Foundation is here now for more. Riley, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Riley, China has retaliated with tariffs on some $60 billion in U.S. imports. Who gets hurt here the most?
Really, it's everyone who's getting hurt here. I think for the United States, the more immediate concern are the American consumers who have to buy more expensive Chinese imports, and American exports who are losing market share in China. Of course, China does feel these tariffs as well. Certainly their exporters and their consumers are feeling the cost, but we could talk about the relative cost of these tariffs, but either way, no one's winning with these tariffs.
Yeah, and we're seeing a new list of more Chinese products targeted for another round of these tariffs, this time $300 billion of Chinese goods. What impact is this back and forth having on the U.S. economy?
Well, luckily the tariffs aren't actually in place just yet. Certainly the most costly effect that these tariffs are having, or at least the announcement of these tariffs is having, is on the stock market. So no real immediate cost to Americans. But once they do go in place, there will be no one who will be safe from the cost of these tariffs. The $300 billion that have yet to be tariffed, but which will address more consumer goods, so things that Americans can expect to see or buy off the shelves. So this is more of a direct cost, while tariffs up to this point have more been intermediate. So businesses have been mostly paying them and passing those costs down to consumers in a diffused or sort of spread out way.
Yeah. President Trump, he's set to sit down with President Xi next month. Best case scenario out of that meeting, Riley?
Well, best case scenario, I don't necessarily see us having an agreement to get rid of these tariffs at the G20 meeting at the end of June, or the meeting between the presidents at least. I do expect the negotiations to go presumably well at that point. Certainly, President Trump continues to admire the good relationship he has with President Xi. But I would expect a deal between the United States and China to happen after the G20.
Yeah. Riley, is this really a case of kind of who blinks first? Trump, he's facing re-election in 2020, but China's president is really a kind of a forever president. So how does this play out?
Certainly. I mean, domestic politics plays into it, certainly more for the United States than China. Certainly, the Chinese government is not as responsible to their public as the American government is. Donald Trump is right in thinking that, the Chinese might be willing to wait for a new administration who might be more soft on China. But I actually say, I don't think the next administration, whether it's a next presidential candidacy next term for President Trump or a new president, I don't believe either of these will be soft on China. It'll probably be, relative. So maybe a new Trump administration will be more harder than a Democratic president. But either way, China is expecting to see, I think, some tough negotiations with Washington in the near and long term.
All right, Riley Walters with the Heritage Foundation. Thanks, Riley.
Thanks for having me.
Wall Street rebounded today after the U.S.-China trade war sent stocks tumbling Monday. Today, the Dow Jones Industrial Average ended the day up about 208 points. The Nasdaq also up at 87 points. And the S&P saw gains of nearly 23 points at the closing bell.
Investigating the investigators, Attorney General Bill Barr is officially looking into the origins of the Russia investigation.
That's right. Bill Barr's appointment of a U.S. attorney will determine whether intelligence gathering on the Trump campaign broke the law.
It was the greatest hoax ever perpetrated on the people of this country.
The investigation that President Trump says exonerated him now has another at how it all began.
I am so proud of our Attorney General that he is looking into it. I think it's great.
U.S. Attorney John Durham is reportedly spearheading the investigation, separate from an ongoing Inspector General inquiry.
They want to look at how that whole hoax got started. It was a hoax.
The president says he was neither aware nor did he ask the Attorney General to appoint a special prosecutor.
This inquiry is a politically motivated distraction.
Democratic Senator Richard Blumenthal warned the probe could tarnish Durham's reputation.
It's another very dedicated professional being given a very unprofessional and unbecoming task.
Senator Tom Cotton told CBN News it's the Democrats who should be nervous.
Attorney General Barr is looking into the origins of this investigation going back to 2016. As he said, he wants to know if the spying that was done on the Trump campaign had a proper predicate. I think a lot of Democrats are very worried about what that probe is going to turn up.
Durham has been reportedly reviewing the beginning of the special counsel investigation into Russian interference and Trump campaign collusion for weeks. Earlier this month, the New York Times reported on an undercover agent sent to meet with a Trump aide in 2016. That's one of the many instances Durham could investigate.
Well, turning to 2020 and the presidential campaign, another day, another Democrat enters the race. Montana Governor Steve Bullock is the latest to join the field of now 22 Democrats. In 2016, Montana went to President Trump by 22 points, yet voters there re-elected the Democrat governor. In his announcement, Bullock highlights his ability to bring together people from both sides of the aisle. And another 2020 hopeful is introducing his education policy. Julian Castro calls it People First Education. The sweeping plan contains 5 main objectives: creating universal pre-K for 3- and 4-year-olds, reimagining high school, including expanding access to college credits for students and more support for music, arts, and foreign language programs, free tuition at public universities, community colleges, and technical or vocation schools, and an expansion of loan forgiveness programs, elevating the profession of teaching by bridging the teach pay gap and supporting unionization, and fairness in education, which would include reforming discipline practices and working to integrate communities.
Julia Manchester with The Hill joins us now for more on 2020. Julia, it looks like Julian Castro is going to be on the debate with the other 20 candidates, but now there are 22. Are we getting to a point where it's too much and it's just kind of overwhelming the voter?
You know, it's so hard to say because when we go back to 2016, the same question was asked about the Republicans. However, I think we're seeing in 2020, a lot of these candidates don't actually think they're going to win. I think a lot of these candidates want to push a specific policy, such as Washington Governor Jay Inslee really pushing climate change, or Congressman Eric Swalwell has been really campaigning on gun control and gun reform. So we're seeing that this is almost a bit of a platform for Democrats to get on and try to influence the party in what direction the party goes in. Now, in terms of influencing the party, we're seeing the two biggest influencers right now are Joe Biden and Senator Bernie Sanders, kind of the progressive wing and the establishment wing. So it'll be interesting to see how on the debate stage these other candidates, which may be lesser known, maybe polling a bit lower than Biden and Sanders, are able to influence the two biggest candidates in the race so far.
What do you make of Montana Governor Steve Bullock getting into the race? Do you think he has any kind of chance?
Well, I think Bullock's logic is he was elected in a very heavily Republican state as a Democratic governor. So I think that's his shtick is kind of, this is how I can attract Democrats as well as Republicans, or maybe swing voters in states such as Michigan or Wisconsin or Pennsylvania, you know, those kind of new swing states. The issue is, I don't think Steve Bullock is really nationally well known as maybe a Joe Biden, a Bernie Sanders, even Elizabeth Warren or Kamala Harris. So he's also very late into this race. So, you know, fundraising will definitely play a factor in that, and how much late candidates are able to catch up with the other ones.
All these Democrats clearly see an opening with President Trump, but then you look at his poll numbers, and he's polling high for President Trump, high at 44.9%. That was with Real Clear Politics, the highest of his presidency. Do they actually stand a chance, or are they underestimating the president?
You know, I think in terms of the president's approval rating, it really hinges on whether he falls below that mid-40s range. For most of his presidency, he's been between 40 and 50%. Sometimes it'll be on the lower end of the 40% range, and sometimes it'll be on the higher end of the 40% range. So depending on where it is on Election Day and leading up to Election Day, I think it's going to be very close, because if it's you know, towards 30% or in the low 40s, you know, I think Democrats could really see a gateway to really push their policies and attract voters that maybe aren't so sure about the president.
Joe Biden, the polls certainly seem to like him a lot. He has a lot of the momentum, a lot of people talking about Joe Biden. But do you think that can last into 2020?
You know, I think that's a very good question. And right now, Joe Biden is polling so well because he's the most well-known candidate. And in a strange sort of way, he's almost kind of like an incumbent, because he's coming from the Obama administration. He was a vice president. So that's going to definitely play into it. However, I think going into the debates, we're going to see a lot of these other Democrats kind of come out of their own shells and try to make their headlines of their own. It'll be interesting to see how Biden reacts to that, whether he kind of sits back and lets them go at it like President Trump did in 2016, or if he gets into the fray.
The big news of today that I saw was Elizabeth Warren turning down this Fox News town hall, and she had a very elaborate tweet about why she wasn't going to do it, spelled it out. One, is she pushing other candidates to make the same move, and is it a good move?
You know, it's interesting because Senator Bernie Sanders, we know he did the Fox News town hall, and we saw that actually a lesser-known Democratic candidate, former Congressman John Delaney, criticized Warren for making that move. I think this is a move that appeals to her base, her very progressive base. And right now, she's in a battle with Bernie Sanders, who is a more well-known candidate for that progressive base. However, the issue with that is that if there is maybe a swing voter who may be more of a conservative Democrat, or a voter that just simply does not necessarily care about which cable news network you watch, they could see this as very highly politicized and very partisan. So, you know, yes, it appeals to a progressive base, but is it going to help her gain other voters or maybe become more popular for conservative Democrats? I don't think so.
Yeah, Julia, what stories are we missing here on the 2020 campaign trail? Are there any sleeper candidates who might come from behind?
You know, I think it's hard to say right now, because I think Biden and maybe Sanders, to a certain extent, have really sucked all the air out of the room. But I'll be interested to see how Cory Booker plays and how Kamala Harris play, and especially how they play in South Carolina. We know that these two candidates have invested quite a bit in South Carolina going into 2020. So I think once we get past Iowa, New Hampshire, into South Carolina and more of the Super Tuesday states, I think you could potentially see Harris and Booker gain some more momentum.
Julia, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, a controversial pro-life measure passed the Michigan Senate today. The bill effectively bans abortion past the first trimester of pregnancy by outlawing a common procedure known as dilation and evacuation. It could make it a crime for doctors to perform that type of abortion, punishable by 2 years in prison. The Republican-led Senate voted the measure through on party lines, but it's unlikely that the measure will become law anytime soon. Michigan's Democratic governor says she won't sign any such legislation that comes across her desk.
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is in Russia tonight, working on shoring up a shaky relationship between the White House and the Kremlin. CBN National Security Correspondent Eric Phillips joins us with the details. Eric, it seems talks mainly focused on arms control and Iran.
Yeah, and I think the mood of the meeting could be characterized as cautiously optimistic. The Secretary of State sat down with his Russian leaders, hoping to overcome challenges of bridging the gap between the two countries. Pompeo capped off the day, meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin, but spent most of his time with the country's foreign minister. He made the purpose for his first trip to Russia as Secretary of State very clear.
I'm here today because President Trump is committed to improving this relationship.
On our behalf, we have said it multiple times that we also would like to rebuild fully fledged relations. Let's try and see what happens.
A pleasant beginning in the middle of a tense situation. Tuesday, a drone attack on a Saudi oil pipeline. Monday, a Saudi tanker sabotaged on the way to the U.S. Iran or its allies suspected in both. All of this after Iran pulled out of a nuclear agreement and set a 60-day deadline for a new one. Nuclear talks have cooled between the U.S. and North Korea, while Pyongyang set off test missiles 2 times last week. And the recent uprising in Venezuela, where Washington and the Kremlin are on opposite sides.
But despite our disagreements, we'll keep talking.
Perhaps about issues like Russia's interference in the 2016 U.S. presidential election.
I believe that an important prerequisite for success of our dialogue is to rebuild trust at all levels of our dialogue.
It's not destined that we're adversaries on every issue, and I hope that we can find places where we have a set of overlapping interests and can truly begin to build out strong relationships.
Pompeo said some of those overlapping issues include counterterrorism, arms control, and nuclear proliferation. He's hoping these talks will put the 2 biggest nuclear powers on the right path.
I think would be good for not only each of our 2 countries and each of our peoples, but for the world as well.
Now, this is the second time in 2 weeks the 2 leaders between the U.S. and Russia have sat down at the table. Today's delayed meeting, though, came after the Secretary of State shifted his business trip from Russia to Brussels yesterday to talk about the mounting emergency surrounding Iran with other world leaders. They'll all come together again next month at the G20 summit.
Eric, you talked about election interference. Did Pompeo draw a line at all in the sand as we look ahead to 2020?
Yeah, did he ever, Jenna? He told Russian officials interference in American elections is unacceptable. And he said if the Russians were to engage in that in 2020, it would put relations between the 2 countries in an even worse place than it has been. He called the U.S. elections important and sacred, and he said they must be kept free and fair with no outside country interfering.
All right, National Security Correspondent Eric Phillips, thank you.
The old guard of Arlington National Cemetery. We talk with Senator Tom Cotton about the history of the Army Regiment when we come back.
Are you or a loved one suffering with addiction to alcohol, opiates, prescription painkillers, or other drugs? There is hope. Each hour, 13 deaths occur due to alcohol or drug abuse. Unfortunately, this number is increasing. If you have been trying to quit your addiction to drugs and alcohol, we are only a phone call away. Call Treatment Centers of America now. We will connect you with an inpatient facility who understands you and who can get you the help you deserve and help you achieve lasting recovery. Medication-assisted treatment is the proven most effective for opiate addiction recovery. Utilizing medications such as methadone, Suboxone, and Subutex, combined with inpatient treatment, you can achieve lasting recovery. Most insurance is accepted. Your treatment could be covered with no out-of-pocket cost. So call Treatment Centers of America now.
Please call 800-605-1658. That is 800-605-1658.
Are you having problems with the IRS? Liens and levies, garnishments, seizures, penalties? Are you being audited? Our trained professionals at Wallen Associates can help. We've helped thousands of individuals and businesses solve their tax problems and save big money.
Having tax issues, it's very scary. I was worried that we would lose our house. When I called Wall & Associates, they were able to meet with me in person, and I never had to talk to the IRS again. It was like this heavy weight was just lifted.
Put a wall between you and the IRS. Wall & Associates has over 30 years of experience dealing with the IRS, and they can help you or your business.
Well, I opened the letter from the IRS, and man, I was shocked. So that's when I decided to call Wall & Associates. They got my levy released within 48 hours.
Call us now for a free consultation. We'll meet with you in person, face-to-face, at an office near you.
Please call 800-603-1286. That is 800-603-1286.
Every hour on the hour, visitors at Arlington National Cemetery can see something extraordinary: the changing of the guard at the tomb of the unknown soldier.
Yeah, remarkable. Well, the ceremony, which takes place every half hour during the summer months, is done by the Army's elite, members of the 3rd U.S. Infantry Regiment, known as the Old Guard.
In a new book, Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton talks about his time serving in the Old Guard. He sat down with Abigail Robertson to discuss why he wrote the book.
So I wrote Sacred Duty to tell the story of the Old Guard of Arlington. Those are the young soldiers who honor our fallen heroes in military honor funerals and guard the tomb of the unknown soldier, because I don't think their story has been told. Many people have visited Arlington, they've seen glimpses of those soldiers, but they don't know their rich history. They're older than our Constitution. They go all the way back to our founding. For 70 years, they've been paying tribute to our fallen heroes. I served there for about 16 months between my combat tours, so I knew a lot about them, and I share that story with various audiences, but there's never been a good book written about the Old Guard, and Sacred Duty tells the story of the Old Guard and the patriotic young soldiers there who are honoring the sacrifices of our nation's warriors.
And one thing I didn't realize until reading the book is this tradition of the dignified transfer is relatively new. Can you tell us a little bit about how that got started?
So the dignified transfer of remains describes the sequences that happen at Dover Air Force Base when a soldier who's killed overseas is returned to our country. Unfortunately, when I was at the Old Guard in 2007 and 2008, that was happening pretty much every night, with many cases of remains every night as well. That was at the height of the surge in Iraq. It's much less common today, but since the very beginning of the Iraq War, the Old Guard has been responsible not just for funerals in Arlington National Cemetery, but also the dignified transfer of remains at Dover Air Force Base.
Mm-hmm. And you mention out in the book Section 60 in the Arlington National Cemetery. For those who don't know, can you just talk a little bit about the significance of that particular area?
Section 60 is where we lay to rest those who have fallen in combat in the War on Terror since 2002. And it had a lot of empty space back in those days. Even when I was at the cemetery, about half of Section 60 was still empty. Today, unfortunately, if you go, it's almost completely filled. But the decision was made back at the beginning of the War on Terrorism that we would put to rest our fallen warriors all in the same place. And it's really unlike any other section in the cemetery. Many sections are much older. There's no more space left. It's our grandfathers and great-grandfathers who might be buried there. Section 60 is a living memorial, though, to those who have fallen over the last 18 years.
Mm-hmm. And what is it like for you to visit Arlington National Cemetery?
It's always inspiring to visit Arlington. It's been particularly rewarding over this last year to be back at Arlington and back with the Old Guard. These young soldiers are so inspiring, as well as the stories you see in Arlington, because every headstone tells a story. And as I describe in more detail in Sacred Duty, those stories are truly inspiring. Many of them are quiet heroes of World War II. Some of them are names you would recognize from their heroism in the War on Terrorism. It's something I try to do with my family. As my young boys get a little older, I take them there and try to describe a little bit more each time about what the soldiers who are resting in Arlington National Cemetery did for our nation and why we should honor their sacrifices and never forget them, which is also going to inspire that next generation of warriors to know that if they should fall in the line of combat, then our nation will honor them and remember them in the same way.
Yeah. You're a Republican senator, but this is not a political book. Why was it important for you to make sure that it was not political?
Well, this is not a book about me or a book about my ideas. This is a book about the Old Guard of Arlington and the way our nation pays tribute to our fallen heroes, which is not a political topic. Arlington, I've noticed, whether I'm speaking with Republicans or Democrats or apolitical Americans, is really a source of national unity and honor and pride.
What do you hope readers take away from this book?
What I hope readers take away is that Arlington and the Old Guard is a place where we express our respect, our admiration, even our love for the young troopers who keep our nation safe. Sadly, some of those will fall on the line of duty, but we will not forget them. We will always honor them, and we will go to the greatest lengths to recover them from overseas, to get them home and return them to their families, to pay tribute to them in that last final moment, that funeral that is the last moment the Army is going to be with them and their family, the last memory their family will have, to give them that one perfect moment of honor. And that really is an expression of our nation's love for our soldiers, and the Old Guard has that solemn responsibility for carrying forward and expressing that love to the family and to the entire nation.
Coming up, a look at how Israel is celebrating 71 years of independence.
Hi, I'm Joan London with A Place for Mom. Over the years, we've helped thousands of families find senior care, and today's senior living communities have never been better, with amazing amenities like movie theaters, exercise rooms and swimming pools, public cafes, bars and bistros, even pet care services. And nobody understands your options like the advisors at A Place for Mom. These are local expert advisors that will partner with you to find the perfect place and determine the right level of care, whether that's just a helping hand or full-time memory care. Best of all, it's a free service. Call today. A Place for Mom. You know your family, we know senior living. Together, we'll make the right choice.
Call A Place for Mom right now to get our free ebook on financing senior care, as well as a free referral for senior living communities in your area. Call 1-800-211-0452. That's 1-800-211-0452.
Are you getting the most out of your Medicare coverage? Did you know there are extra benefits available? Dental, vision, hearing, and prescription drug coverage? Make sure you're on the plan that's right for you. Many areas have plans available with $0 copays for many services and $0 deductibles. Plus, premiums may be as low as $0 a month. Call now for your free Medicare coverage review.
Please call 800-684-2716.
Why have thousands of aspiring authors teamed up with Christian Faith Publishing to publish their book? Because Christian Faith Publishing is an author-friendly publisher who understands that your labor is more than just a book. Professional book editing, award-winning design, and some of the highest royalty structures in the publishing industry. Christian Faith Publishing will publish, market, and sell your books in all major bookstores, online booksellers, as well as specialty Christian bookstores. Call for your free author submission kit.
Please call 800-717-1065.
71 years ago today, on May 14, 1948, Israel declared its independence.
And 1 year ago today, it was a historic event of a different sort. The U.S. Embassy moved to Jerusalem. Israelis celebrated last week with dancing in the streets and fireworks. And to celebrate the embassy move, events are planned all week. In a recent op-ed, U.S. Ambassador to Israel, David Friedman, said contrary to all of the negative predictions, the Jerusalem embassy has been an extraordinary success.
I feel like it was just yesterday that opened.
Time
It's amazing.
flies, I know.
Yeah, that's going to do it for tonight's Faith Nation.
Have a great evening.